with your weekly video. Today we're going to be talking about the Seahawks, Seattle Seahawks, final team in the NFC West we'll be talking about this week. First, I want to get to some possibly breaking news. We're going to be talking about Rivers and Stafford because we got some breaking news about both of them over the past week. So we know that Rivers is retiring. He's already announced that he's going to retire. That makes your decision pretty easy if you own him, that you'll be able to cut him whenever the 1 week window opens where you're able to drop him for free. So just hold on to him until then. And as far as their replacement goes, Jacob Eason is really the only quarterback on the roster at the moment. He was a rookie last year. Obviously didn't get hardly any experience in real game, especially with no preseason. So we'll see. I expect them to make an offseason move for a quarterback at some point. So they're going to have to at least get a backup if Eason is the starter. And then we also are hearing word that Stafford isn't going to be re-signed by the Lions going into 2021. I think it's a little more than gossip. It's not for sure yet. It hasn't been, stated that he's for sure leaving, but that seems to be the expectation. So I'll have to watch that. I do find it funny that one of the best places I think Stafford could land is Indy. So it's funny we're talking about both Rivers and Stafford in this one. Maybe he'll be his replacement. We'll just have to wait and see. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about the NFC West Seahawks. This is the final team that we have for the NFC West. And what I have is I have 7 rosterable free agents that they'll be having to make decisions on for this next year. And I'll list them off for you. They are Greg Olsen, Jacob Hollister, Carlos Hyde, Philip Dorsett, Josh Gordon, David Moore, and Chris Carson. And we already actually got word earlier this week that Greg Olsen's retiring, so that bumps it down to 6 now. But the other 6, they're all worth monitoring. I'm not going to talk about all of them today. I'm just going to talk about a few. And the first one is going to be Carlos Hyde. So Hyde is an unrestricted free agent coming into 2021. He's a journeyman running back. Most of you know that. He's been on 5 teams in 7 years, so he's been around the league. He's 30 years old. He just finished a single-year, $2.75 million contract. He only started 1 game, and that's to be expected that he's starting little games with Chris Carson there as well. So starting 1 game, he finished as the RB 57, and he had 84 fantasy points. So it's not great. He's really a glorified backup. He's an above-average running back that can do what he's needed to do, but that's about it. I don't expect Seattle to re-sign him. I think he'll continue to move on in his career. Wherever he goes, he'll probably be in the same role that he's always been in: backup, change of pace back, insurance type back, something like that. And then I'm looking at about $3 million per year for him. Moving on, we're going to talk about David Moore. So he's an unrestricted free agent also. He's 26 years old. He just finished a 1-year, $2.13 million contract. And Moore, I like him. I like him as a receiver. He's carved out a nice little niche in Seattle. He isn't a high-volume receiver. I think he's caught an average of 26 passes over the past 2-3 years per year. So not great, but he is a possession and red zone target for Russ. He did have a career-high 6 touchdowns last year. So he's owned in less than 60% of leagues, which I thought was pretty low, especially not knowing where he's going next year. He's right at $2 million, so I would suggest you pick him up now if you have the $2 million cap space. Worst case scenario, he signs a new contract and you drop him for free. So I'd pick him up, see if he's available. The final and most important free agent we're going to talk about is Chris Carson. So obviously he is the most anticipated. He's going to get the biggest paycheck. He's 26 years old. I found it interesting. He's scored 15.6 fantasy points per game in the games that he plays, and I believe that's over the last 2 or 3 years. So he was running back 20 in 2020. Last year he was running back 20, and pretty good for someone that has a contract a little over $600,000. Spot Track has him projected at $7.4 million per year at the moment, and I agree with that. I predicted somewhere between $7 and $9 million. So think like somewhere between Todd Gurley contract and Melvin Gordon contract for last year. That's probably what he's going to be making, and that fits. That's right about what his projection should be. So And then I found it interesting that Carson's ADP in 2020 was right at 50, despite a crazy cheap salary. I know part of that was he injured his hip, and he was kind of uncertain if he was coming back full strength at the beginning of this year, especially with no preseason. So it makes sense that he dipped that far. And I figure he'll be right around that same range. He might be drafted a little bit before that when you're talking about startup drafts. So those are all of the speculations I'm going to talk about. And we're going to have one contract breakdown today. Let me turn on my article here. We can talk about it. So we have another mystery contract like we did last week. So here is the breakdown. As always, who would you rather own in Dynasty Owner? And so this is 2 players, 16-game pace last year. So 16-game pace. Alpha Bravo. Alpha, 106 receptions, 1,230 yards, doubled Bravo's touchdowns, and fantasy points are not even close. So I think the obvious answer is you want Alpha. And I kind of did this little tongue-in-cheek thing in the article, asking if I'm all right, do I need to lay down? Obviously, you're going to want Alpha. But what if their contracts were $15 million apart or more? Would you still want Alpha? Probably. It depends, but probably. I mean, you want the better player. If you're going to pay up for a receiver, you might as well do it for one that's going to dominate 325 fantasy points. So what if I told you that these 2 players make exactly the same per year? They're under the contract for the same amount of time, and they play on the same team. And it's kind of a trick question. It's all true because they're the same person. So I have to explain it. Player A is Tyler Lockett's 16-game pace over his first 8 games in 2020. Player B is Tyler Lockett's 16-game pace over his final 8 games in 2020. So you can obviously see the big difference. And it just goes to show how inconsistent of a season he had. I believe he was wide receiver 1. It was either week 6 or week 7. He was wide receiver 1, and DK was, I believe, 3 or 4. So he was right behind him. But I mean, to fall from 1, and I was actually kind of surprised that he still ended up at wide receiver 8. That's a little bit harder than I would have thought for how bad of a second half he had. Anyway, so his season was highlighted by games of 33, 37, and 59.2 fantasy points. That 59.2 was his 200-yard, 3-touchdown game. I think he caught 14 passes. So, yeah, then I ask you, where do you think Lockett finished? And I already told you, wide receiver 8. So then I compared to some similar contracts. Here's everybody that is rosterable between $10 million and $12 million in Dynasty Owner. I left out players like Larry Fitz and Tyrell Williams. Larry Fitz isn't rosterable. I don't know exactly how many points he got, but it wasn't enough to roster an $11 million wide receiver. And then Tyrell Williams, I still don't understand how he makes $11 million per year. He shouldn't even he can't even be in this conversation. So anyway, Lockett scored the most of any of these 5 players, more than Keenan Allen, which was a little shocking to me. And obviously you can see their ages are pretty similar as to be expected with salaries around the same, right around $10 million. Yep, so that's pretty much it. And then I just go over, what the outlook is for him coming into next year. He's going to be 100% owned. There's no doubt about it. I mean, his ceiling is unbelievable. So even with maybe Russ passing a little bit less over the second half, coming in 2021, passing a little bit less, maybe relying on the run game a little bit more, it's going to be tough to get high volume games. But with the ceiling like that, he's gonna have to be 100% owned. So I'd be a seller for the right price. It's probably right around a mid-second, maybe a little bit high second. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for reading. Thanks for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking about the NFC South. I believe the Falcons are up next, so we'll be talking about them. And, continue to support Dynasty Owner. Follow us at Dynasty Owner on Twitter. And I really appreciate everybody tuning in and taking the time to watch. I hope you all take care and be safe.